Welcome to the Content Culture Podcast with your host, Jessica Northey.
This is Jessica with the Content Culture Agency, and our guest today is Stephanie.
So my name is Stephanie Steidel, like bridal. I am the founder and owner of a company called The Right Brain Entrepreneur. My experience, over 20 years of experience in psychology and a master's in art therapy. And what I discovered in my studies and my experience is that few of us have the tools to tap into our innately creative selves. And no matter what area of life we want to expand in, but most especially for business, we need to learn how to tap into that so that we can be resourceful, fulfilled, and effective.
Going through the process of having the right brain with the creative brain, and they say left and right is creative, I don't know, but I used to say that I use both sides because I'm a graphic designer, but I've studied business. But what I've noticed that once I get into a lot of that business administrative type of roles, it's really difficult for me to pull myself back into the more creative side. And I found that your exercises did help me. Even though I'm a graphic designer, you think that I just live on my, creative side of my brain, but I don't. And it's not always, because you're thinking logical a lot of the times too.
Yeah, so you're right, Jessica. We're always using both sides of our brain. There is a myth that you're either right-brained or you're left-brained because we're constantly using both hemispheres. However, as human beings, we're conditioned and trained through several things, generally education, society, our culture, our family systems. These all contribute to who we become as adults. And unfortunately, these systems are very reliant on a particular way of processing information, what I call left brain thinking. We do know that each hemisphere operates differently, and the left brain is our analytical, verbal center. It's pretty risk adverse. It wants to make sure everything's perfect, and also it can be pretty critical. So it's very helpful. It's the part of our brain that helps us get things done. And then the right side of our brain is our creative center. It doesn't take in information through language or words. It only takes in information through visuals, images. It's also that part of our brain that is creative, intuitive, and emotive. And most of us, by default, when we have a challenge or when we're trying to achieve something in our life, we will automatically go to what we know, which is a left brain process. Because if you even think about our education system that most of us go through, it's very standardized. It's very much about math and science and languages. The arts are extracurricular. They're the first thing to go when budgets are cut. So there's a value system already on the kinds of thoughts and beliefs that we as humans should be operating through or by. And so when, especially as an entrepreneur, which is going to be completely out of the comfort zone for most of us that are used to being employees, and it's risky, right? It's not for the faint of heart. When we tap into entrepreneurship, we have to really learn how to harness our brain's fullest potential and learn how to use that right brain to overcome challenges, to problem solve, and to really see the bigger picture for our business as well.
That seems very important. I feel like even maybe this is probably something even high school students should learn.
Yes, I wish, I've been recently thinking about possibly just getting more involved in education reform. Sir Ken Robinson is someone that's really great for someone to, if you're interested in learning more about shifting the education paradigm, he does a lot of talks on how creativity is killed in schools and how we need to change our education system to help us flourish more as human beings.
Yeah, it's time.
Yeah. So if we all could learn from a younger age to, dance and play a little bit more and honor our differences and what makes us unique and not have it always be about there's only one right answer, and learn how to collaborate and learn leadership and communication skills and have more fun, that's going to directly impact in a very positive way our adult lives and the connections and ultimately our happiness.
Well, it sounds like a great mission to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
So at what point in your process, do you begin coaching your clients about the why? Because that's really what I want to get into today, is the importance of it. And in our process, I know you started off with it in the beginning, and I noticed that I didn't go back to it until much, much later in the process when I got stuck. But I asked, when do you start it in the beginning, but do you ever go back to it? How often do you suggest really thinking about that? And what does that mean
Yes, great question. So because of the way most of us have been conditioned to use our brain, we are very detail oriented and, like I said, very analytical. So for example, in the context of starting a business, when you do a search for business courses, you're going to see that a lot of them saying, do a business plan, start your website here, get your logo done. So we immediately think we need to start with all these tiny little details because we think that that's what makes a business. And it's important, but it's only one part of having a business. And we all want to generate income and have stability in our lives. So income is important. But the statistics are very clear that for those that go into business just for money, they might make a lot of money, but at some point they get to an area where they're no longer fulfilled. And they have to reevaluate or repivot, or maybe the business doesn't do well because it's not really connected to the business owner on a deeper level. And so there's some self-sabotage that happens. So I always start with why, mainly because it's what's going to make or break you. If your why isn't big enough, the brain will pull you back into your comfort zone. It'll give you all the reasons why you should just go back and get a job, or why you shouldn't work on your business today, or why you shouldn't make that phone call. So the why has to be bigger. And there's a couple of different kinds of whys. There's the why of your business, and there's also the personal why. Ultimately, I find with my clients, when we dive really deep, they're one and the same, but there might be a little bit of a different flavor. So for example, my why is to help people tap into their fullest potential so that they can have the life of their dreams. That's who I am at my core. That's who I am with my family, with my friends, and my clients. That's also my business why. But I have some other whys. Why did I go into business versus maybe just find a full-time job that would allow me to do that? Well, freedom is really important to me. That's part of my why. I want to be able to work from anywhere and have my own schedule. So it's kind of like a secondary why, and people really need to know what is it that's really influencing and motivating them. And it can't just be material because they're impermanent. They're very temporary. It's not going to really pull you through. So you have to have that bigger commitment, and you got to start off with that. Because it's also going to lend itself to your brand. It's going to help you create your branding, your messaging, build out all those nuts and bolts as well. Here's the thing, the why is probably going to be, you can expect to resist it. I don't know if you remember this in the program, but in the video, the training video where I first talk about the why, and then we talk about how the why leads into who you're going to serve, that it might make you a little nauseous. Like if it's making you a little bit scared of like, I'm going to work with these people, this is what I'm going to be doing, then it's most likely exactly what you need to be doing. We're learning that even more and more in the personal transformation world, is you want to go towards your fear. I mean, obviously don't put yourself in a completely unsafe environment. You're not going to walk through a really dangerous neighborhood. I'm not talking about that. But like, if you know that you want to achieve something, but there's a fear there, there's no way to go through the fear. You can't go around it. You have to go through it. And so the why is going to be challenged, and it'll probably be challenged not only by you, but also by those around you, because especially if it's a pretty big why, it's going to scare other people for a couple of reasons. One, the people closest to you, they want to keep you safe. That's just their natural reaction. They're coming from what they know to be good in their hearts. So they might try to talk you out of it. Oh, you don't really do that. Like, don't do musicians, they don't have any money, or why would you work with creatives? Like, it's just a dead end. There's all these conditioning that other people have that they'll put onto you. So first of all, you might hear it from other people because they're trying to protect you, but also because it shows them, it's like a big mirror where when you start to live out your why, some people call it your purpose, your calling, your bigger mission. There's lots of different names for it, but it's a reflection to other people of what they're not doing. So if they're not living their why, it's like the crabs in the boiling water. They're going to try to pull all their friends down in the water with them. So it's an important warning that yes, if you want to have a fulfilled life and career, you have to start with why. We cannot expect it to be easy. In fact, there's going to be a lot, especially at first, there's going to be a lot of internal and external voices that are going to try to convince you to do otherwise. And your job is to not lose sight of the end game, the end result.
So crabs in a bucket. I used to say that all the time because the analogy was when you're trying to crawl out of the bucket and you're going to make it, the crab that's underneath of you pulls you down. They really do that to each other. Mm-hmm. So they can't get out and they cannot escape and make a better life. So
yeah, and that's such an important lesson because we do that as human beings. Probably not consciously.
No.
But if you remember, I'm sure I drilled this in when we did our work together, is that's why you need to have such a supportive community. And oftentimes it means finding new community. It doesn't mean you're going to disown other people, but listen, if you're going to quit smoking, you can't hang out with your smoker friends. Very few people are going to have enough resilience to be able to not be tempted. For at first, until you really solidify the new habits, you're probably going to need to hang out with other people who aren't smoking or do different activities. It's also, why people who, couples, like if one person wants to lose weight, it's very hard to lose weight if the other person isn't on board, because all of a sudden it's like, oh, what's the big deal? Just have this piece of fried chicken, or just, so mm-hmm. It's going to be very important to have a supportive community, people that get it, people that are going to lift you up during this process, because generally the people that are closest to us, because they love us so much, unless they are entrepreneurs themselves, they're just not going to get it. They're going to view it through their filter.
So I was, curious throughout your client's journey. So when should they check in with their why? Is there, maybe 30 days? That's a good idea.
Yeah, that's right. I went off on a tangent. I got so passionate. Well, one of the things that I had you do, and also all of my clients, is I have them create a vision board. Vision board, it's not just some woo-woo thing. We're tapping into the right brain so that we can actually uncover your why, some aspects of your why, but it's also meant to be a permanent reminder and motivating factor for you as you move through. So I recommend, maybe if someone doesn't want to do a vision board, they can do something else where they're at least writing down their goals, or they're writing a story of their vision, and then they have it up on a wall where it's always there. As soon as it becomes wallpaper and you don't notice it anymore, then you need to change it so that you do it. Some people I know, they revisit their why every day. It's a part of their morning practice, part of their meditation. That's one possibility. But other times it really depends on the person, and it depends on how much resistance might be coming up. And you definitely want to check in once resistance is there. And by resistance, I mean things such as procrastination, or if you're finding you're not taking action, or you're finding that there's fears that are coming up, or anxieties, you have to revisit your why, because when you are playing that big game of the why, all the little stuff no longer is important. Right? If I'm trying to end world hunger, making a phone call and risking rejection is such a small problem in regards to, or in comparison to, ending world hunger. Right? So we have to kind of check our ego a little bit, and it's not easy. So it depends on the why. I would say I can't really give you like a concrete thing. I would say at least once a month is helpful, but you might need to do it more often. And then especially if you find that you're stuck or struggling, then you've got to go back to, why am I really doing this? Especially on the days when you want to quit, because it's going to be really easy to quit if you aren't connected to the why. And
now that you say that, I probably should do it more often.
If I may add real quickly, the why becomes a compass for you. So it helps you to make what would otherwise be difficult decisions. If you know where you're going and you have an opportunity that's in front of you, all you need to ask yourself is this aligned with my why or not? And if the answer is a resounding no, then your answer is no. If it's a yes, then it's a yes, right? So then you have this measuring stick that you can use to make decisions both in your life and in your business. So that's another good time to use the why, is whenever you have a big important decision to make.
I don't want to digress too much, but really easy to get pulled into a different direction if you don't know your why.
This is very true. And, in some circumstances, I would say this is more rare. You might need to say yes to a lot of things in order to have a deeper understanding of your why and what fits and what doesn't. But generally, if you know what your why is, we end up shooting ourselves in the foot if we say yes. And it's common. It's, There's no reason to be ashamed because we all do it. Say we really need the money, we might say yes to something. And there might be circumstances where that's actually aligned to your why. Okay, I won't enjoy doing this, but it's a short-term project. It's going to put a couple $1,000s into my pocket that I can then invest into my business, right? So you could make a decision as you could turn it into something that actually is aligned. But at a certain point, the cost will be worse for you to take unaligned opportunities because it will distract you, but also you will most likely not do very well in those opportunities because on a deeper level, it doesn't feel aligned. So you won't show up as your best self. You won't do what you know you need to do. And a lot of it might happen subconsciously. You might not even be aware that you're sabotaging this opportunity. But I had it too. It's a scarcity mindset. It's like, if I don't say yes to this, nothing else will show up. Then I'm screwed. But really, we have to start to practice an abundance mindset. One of my favorite quotes is from a mentor of mine was that every rejection is protection. And so kind of taking on this idea of trust, it's a little bit more woo-woo-y, of this kind of faith that by continuing to say no to the things that aren't aligned, it's going to send a message to the universe to only send you things that are aligned. And that has been my experience, is the more I've said no to things that aren't aligned, the faster and quicker I started to get opportunities that were in my best interest and in the best interest of others.
That's very powerful. Completely changes the mindset. And coming back to the right brain, how does knowing your why for your business affect the right brain? Is that more of a creative thought pattern?
Yes, of course. And we're starting to see things shift in the business world where people are starting to pay more attention to their brand, their message, their mission, their vision. But it's the right brain is very big pictured. So it can see multiple solutions to a problem. That's why it's so good at being creative. The left brain is very detail oriented. It can go in and onto the little nuances. So it's great when you do need to organize and get into action. The why, in essence, is very much right brained because you are looking at your business and your life from the bigger picture perspective. And it offers you more opportunities, right? Because if you have this big playground of a why to play in, you're going to come up with a lot more cooler ideas and opportunities and different ways to fulfill on that. Versus if you pigeonhole yourself into one tiny little thing. So that's where people often get very confused with like a mission versus a vision. Your mission is usually like time. It's measured within time. So you have a mission within 5 years, we want to decrease homelessness by 50%. But your vision is different. Your vision is, we imagine a world and everything that we do is to end homelessness and make sure that every human being has a roof over their head. So there's a little bit different, in that vision, a lot of cool things can happen and you don't have to be attached to how it looks as long as you get there. The mission, right, if you want to decrease homelessness by 50%, then you have to be a lot more specific. So it's important to not get too caught up in that. That's why you want to maintain that as the bigger picture, that right brain, because it's going to allow for more possibilities.
Awesome. Thank you for that distinction. So is there anything else you'd like to add or share that we haven't, any projects you're working on? Or?
Well, it's interesting that this conversation is happening right when I point where I'm possibly going to be rebranding my own business. Because the important thing to note is the why is always, it's not a static thing. So it's always going to evolve. I mean, ultimately, I'm always going to be helping people tap into their fullest potential. But how I fulfill on that can change and evolve. And I'm in that inquiry right now. But what's helping me is knowing that, okay, why I know that my bigger why is probably not going to change. It might shift in a few tiny, small ways, but it leaves me space to be like, oh, well, maybe I could go do this thing and I could do that thing as long as I'm still fulfilling on that bigger why. So it's also, I think, just important to distinguish the why versus the brand, because again, the why it's meant to not really change drastically. The how, the brand, the messaging, that can all change. But that it's important to know that it's not equivalent to the why. And that's kind of exactly what I'm going through myself, is like, okay, I think there might be a different way that I want to fulfill on my why, and I don't know what that looks like. So I'm kind of going through my own introspective journey to understand that on a deeper level. And there's nothing wrong with that, because everything I've done up until now has led to what I'm doing. And what I do in the future is probably not going to be a huge pivot. It's just going to be a different variation, or chapter 2 or chapter 3.
Right.
So I think it's important for people to have some flexibility and understanding that, if they put all their time and effort into a project for 3 years and then they realize, okay, this is no longer fulfilling for me, I want to do something else. It doesn't mean the why is wrong. It just means you've fulfilled on that first chapter of your why, and now it's time to go into chapter 2. The last thing I wanted to mention about the why is this is something that's really difficult to do on your own. And I've even hired another expert to help me to fully dive even more into my purpose and why, because I've already done a lot of work, but it doesn't mean there isn't another level to go into. So I do recommend anyone that's listening that's really interested in getting, to know their why, get a coach. Even just doing a course is a great first step, but oftentimes we need the reflection of someone else, because even when we're doing a do-it-yourself course, we're kind of still using the same brain that gets us stuck to do the work. And it's very easy to fall back into old patterns or not have that work for us. So I would recommend finding someone who can help you discover your why. It's not going to be found in a book, unfortunately. It's a very interactive process. So that would just be my recommendation, is that if you're struggling to land on it, you definitely need some outside help.
I agree. And there's definitely nothing wrong with asking for help in something that's such a foundational point of everything that you do moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the times a person's why is based on their life experiences. And most of the time it's from something that is very vulnerable and hard to share with others. But when other people share that vulnerability with me, it does create openness and trust in a way. And sometimes it's really hard to get that just with a website or some cool branding.
Yeah, well, I think it was another mentor, I've had many, once said that your mess becomes your message. And especially for creatives and artists, and there's a lot of people out there that are also trying to showcase their work. And I don't say that to discourage, because no matter where you go, there's going to be competition, honestly.
Yes.
But there's no one like you. So you have to own your unique gifts, but also your unique story and your mess. And
I love that.
Yeah. And own that, like, everything you've been through up until now, you're still here, you're still alive, you made it.
Right.
So consider that there was a purpose of sorts to that, and look at, okay, what have I learned and how can I use this to strengthen my message, to connect to my audience, to my fans. I have a very good friend. She was my matron of honor. She's a coach for musicians, and she tackles the nuts and bolts and stuff, but if you were to follow her on Instagram or Facebook, she's doing a lot of Facebook Lives about, like, oh, I'm having this bad day. What am I doing about it? Oh, I had this snafu. Let's talk about the emotional, troubles of a musician and how do we deal with these things. So, and that's her style. She's being authentic and vulnerable. And I agree with you, Jessica. I think the more that we can bring that into play, the more we're going to connect and the more we're going to attract people, because the stats are in. We want to do business. We want to connect and partner with people that are up to cool stuff, up to things that matter, that make a difference. And we want to do it with people who are being real. You can't do that if you're not willing to be vulnerable.
I agree. The perfection thing, I think, affects a lot of people.
And we can't relate to them if they're perfect.
No.
Yeah, people buy you. So, your content can be great, but if it doesn't show you who you are, it's going to be really hard for people to connect to you. You can't get around being yourself.
That's true.
Yeah, it's going to be really hard because people, you know how when someone's like not being authentic, you can kind of sniff it out. Like, we can tell. We're smart as human beings. So people can sniff out when you're not being real. So stop it.
I know. I think I call them my spidey senses.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's just there. You just know it.
Yeah.
That was a great interview and very, very helpful. You had some
Thank you for
great
having
tips.
me.
Yeah, of course. I know I'm going to be really excited whenever you launch your, calling it a rebrand or?
I don't know. I'm still in that mysterious place of not knowing what it looks like. I'm kind of going back to the why and fleshing it out a little bit more.
Well, have you
But
gotten out into nature?
it's hard not to here in San Diego. I've been spending
Oh,
a
you're
lot
in
of
San
time at the
Diego.
beach.
Just try to connect with appreciating nature. I find that I go back in the house and all of a sudden, like, I've got all these ideas. I don't know what happens. I just feel like getting outside of the four walls that, we're always in.
Mm-hmm. Well, isn't that the magical thing? You just said it so perfectly, Jessica. I think it's a great way to end this interview. Is like, if you can get out of the four walls that you're in,
Yes. Yes.
the answer will come. Change up your environment, get out, find a way to break through the walls of your mind. Like, it's just a perfect metaphor for like, just take one step outside and have
Yes.
another perspective, and you'll figure it out.
Awesome. Definitely a great way to end the podcast. Thank you so much for being with us today, and I look forward to being in touch soon.
Okay. Thank you.